I am now absolutely delighted to welcome Heather Leggett from Eneraque, who are our session sponsor for this upcoming session, which is looking to be an incredible session. So thank you so much, Heather. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Eneraque, and today we gather to explore biomethane acceleration, a powerful force driving the global transition towards cleaner energy sources. As the world embraces the urgent need to reduce carbon emissions and combat climate change, several countries are stepping up as trailblazers, leading the way in harnessing biomethane's potential. Join us as we delve into the innovative strategies and initiatives undertaken by these nations, witnessing firsthand the transformative impact of biomethane in shaping a sustainable and greener future for all of us. So today, Johannes Escudero from the US Renewable Gas Coalition will discuss North America's sustainable methane abatement and recycling timeline. James from EDL will discuss the US Biomethane Industry and the learnings from this mature market. Kunal Shah from Anaergia will take us to Italy to discuss the market conditions enabling building one of the country's largest food waste to biomethane platforms. And Callum from Evonik will discuss the European biogas market. So before we head into what is happening around the world, I want to share with you some of the work we at Eneraque are doing locally, just down the road. For more than 40 years, Eneraque has been pioneering renewable gas technology with a specialisation in waste to energy, biogas technologies and biogas to biomethane upgrading. We design, engineer, build, maintain and operate bioenergy systems for our partners across landfill and wastewater sites, agriculture, food and beverage, and more. We're passionate about the future of energy, driving multiple region-first projects across the Asia-Pacific. We have been an integral part of the journey for bioenergy since its infancy in Australia and have been passionate advocates for biogas's role in our circular economy and the pathway to net zero. The messaging is clear. Biomethane is part of a critical discussion about our energy future. Biomethane is regarded as the invisible renewable. The International Energy Agency's Executive Director has said that modern bioenergy is the overlooked giant of the renewable energy field, and its share in the world's total renewables consumption is about 50%. In other words, as much as hydro, wind, solar, and all other renewables combined. But despite Australia being a land of plenty and potential, we are lagging behind our global counterparts who have been harnessing the power of this technology for decades. Biogas is a significant part of our renewable energy portfolio. In Germany and Denmark, they are using biomethane to supply at least 20% of their natural gas grid, with a goal to increase this to 100% by 2050. There has been $6.1 billion worth of investment in biomethane globally in the first quarter of this year. It is projected that by 2050, 50%, yes, half of all gas consumption in Australia can be accounted for by biogas, that it can add $50 billion to Australia's GDP and provide more than 18,000 jobs. Biomethane has created a job for me. Where I work, Eneraque, at Rockley, we have been advocating for biogas and biomethane for a long time. In the past 20 years in particular, our team have witnessed the rapid uptake of behind-the-meter waste gas to energy technology, particularly for landfill and wastewater sites who use biogas to generate heat and electricity. Our waste to energy technology extends to anaerobic digesters, landfill to energy, wastewater to energy and biogas upgrading. Our Brisbane manufacturing hub is building full-scale containerised equipment that is delivered to sites around the Asia-Pacific, so we're powering renewable energy locally. Our biogas upgrading technology has been developed in consultation with our partners in Europe, where biogas technologies are mature, high-performance, sophisticated systems based on decades of working practice. We take a portion of this state-of-the-art European equipment and then manufacture bespoke plants made for the Asia-Pacific, encompassing local standards, regulations, infrastructure considerations, and the local climate. This is done locally, and we're capable of building these full-scale equipments that we can deliver anywhere. We're passionate about partnering with businesses in the Asia-Pacific to grow biomethane as a market and to make connections between users, suppliers, and providers. We have supplied the biogas upgrading system for Australia's first biomethane grid injection project in Sydney. The system takes raw biogas from Sydney Water's Malabar Water Resource Recovery Plant, which is a wastewater facility, and upgrades it into high-quality pipeline-ready biomethane that is injected into Sydney's main gas grid, servicing an estimated 13,300 homes. At Reparoa on New Zealand's North Island, we have partnered with First Gas to upgrade biogas derived from organic waste to biomethane for injection into New Zealand's main gas grid, a first for New Zealand. When complete, 11,000 tonnes of CO2 are estimated to be avoided each year, with a gas supply equivalent of 7,200 New Zealand homes. Our biogas technologies include power generation, bio-CO2, biogas scrubbing and polishing, biogas storage, upgrading, biogas to hydrogen, biogas flaring, and CO2 liquefaction. Biomethane is big business, which can take advantage of existing infrastructure. It's mature technology that is ready to roll. Biomethane is not simply a critical part of our pathway to net zero, but an intelligent commercial decision, a product that deserves time, attention, and uptake. Our projects demonstrate that biomethane technology is available, working, and ready. They get the attention of those who have thought, why biomethane, and turn this into a why not. We are here in this room to catalyse that change. So if you would like to talk about future energy with our team, you can find us on the exhibition floor. And now I'll hand it over to Johannes Escudero, who's coming in via video link, and just have some questions ready while we go through the presentations. There's going to be a 20-minute Q&A at the end.
Good morning, Brisbane. How is everyone? How are we doing? Okay, I trust you can see me, although not all that important, more important that you can hear. I can't see you, but I'll trust that unless I get a note in the chat, everything is A-okay. I wish I could be there and would like to extend my apologies for not being with you all in person today. Technology is certainly convenient, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to connect with you all virtually, but nothing replaces being in the room and reading the room together. I'd also like to thank my friend James Harman, CEO at EDL, a leadership member of our organization, who's at least partially responsible or perhaps liable for recommending me to Shahana. And to Shahana, McKenzie, Adele Bennett, Shannon Clancy, and the rest of the Bioenergy Australia team, thank you for the invitation to provide the keynote address for this segment of your Renewable Fuels Week program. Just a little bit about me briefly. My name is Johannes Escudero. I'm the proud son of an Italian immigrant who immigrated to the United States from Argentina. I inherited my entrepreneurial DNA honestly from my mother, who was a concert pianist with the Argentine Conservatory of Music, and who at the very young age sold her few earthly possessions to afford and purchase an airplane ticket, and subsequently leave her family, her friends, and all that was familiar, so as to give her future unborn children, my siblings and I, opportunities in the United States of America that she intuitively and instinctively knew we would never have there. So I say that to share that I carry with me a sobriety. Some people have called me an old soul even from a young age, but also an understanding of an appreciation for the sacrifices that she made. And with that comes a deep sense of responsibility to somehow in some way improve the world we live in so as to leave it in a better condition for our children and their children and their children. Many years later, and still much too soon, my mother passed away rather unexpectedly on the same bittersweet day that then Governor of California signed our organization's first bill into law. It was landmark legislation that effectively put the Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas and arguably RNG on the map in North America. You know, they say, when life gives you lemons, you plant the seeds and cultivate a lemon orchard. You then make lemonade, bottle and sell that, and then put the rest of the lemon in an anaerobic digester to produce RNG to fuel, heat, and power the world, right? So we are certainly optimistic and bullish on renewable natural gas, or biomethane, as you say. I have the pleasure of serving as CEO for the Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas, a nonprofit organization that my business partner David Cox and I founded in July of 2011 to provide a policy platform and an advocacy voice for the RNG, or renewable natural gas industry in North America. As unconscionable as it was to think that any industry could possibly exist, much less hope to thrive in the 21st century without representation, such was the case for the North American RNG industry, at least until 2011. And since then, with the support from our growing team, 18 members of staff, our leadership advisory boards, we have 5, and more than 390 member companies, we have the privilege of advancing our shared mission and pursuing our SMART initiative through leadership, education, advocacy, development, and sustainability. Together, we're advocating and educating for the sustainable development, deployment, and utilization of renewable natural gas so that present and future generations will have access to domestic, renewable, clean fuel and energy. We support RNG produced from all feedstocks, using all competing technologies for all sustainable end-use applications. Now, I received the invitation, was asked to speak about all the great things that the RNG Coalition has achieved and some of the current issues and opportunities we're addressing in North America. I'll attempt to do that in the short amount of time that we have together, but as CEO, one of my primary responsibilities is to generate revenue for our organization, to secure financial support for our mission and for our SMART initiative, including through pitching membership and sponsorships and participation in our programs and events. And in closing such sales over the course of my career, I've learned that nothing, absolutely nothing, is bought, but everything is sold. And yet nothing is sold until a story is told. And there is nothing more rapturing than an authentic story. Fiction certainly sells. Then we have advertisements, commercials, novels, movies. But when it's your story and it's true, it becomes magical in the sense it's more than marketing, it's part of history. And every one of us has a story, a reason why we feel called or similarly summoned to do the work that we do, and to some degree explains why all of us are gathered here in person and virtually today. I had a producer recently tell me that in order to gain traction with today's audience, you have to be informative, you have to be inspiring and entertaining. Now, I'll just set expectations and concede entertainment here from the outset, but I do trust that you will be better informed, certainly by the end of the segment, if not by the end of our keynote, so as to continue to take action even after any inspiration has waned. But what I really want for you to buy into is the idea that because you and I are already embedded in an environmental and economic equation, an equation that some would call a problem, we not only have an incredible responsibility, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to help solve the world's most daunting climate change challenge and alter the course of human history for the better in the process. You know, the problem and solution hinges on a question of our behavior, and that is, what should we do with the waste that we're producing as a society? And furthermore, what should we do with the methane that's emitting from those inevitable waste streams? And more personally, what can you and I do about it? These are questions that my business partner and I began asking ourselves in earnest almost 13 years ago now, which led to research that spurred subsequent outreach to industry stakeholders and ultimately to a strong belief in what the answers to these questions were and still are today, that we took a leap of faith and left the proverbial golden handcuffs of what was our secure state legislative employment in July of 2011 to found the Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas. It's hard to believe, but the overnight success we've been credited for and asked to speak about briefly today has been more than a decade in the making. And even then, our organization stands on the shoulders of decades of industry work that preceded our coming onto the scene. But we've blinked twice, and the RNG Coalition will celebrate our 12th anniversary this summer. Somebody said, and I don't know who it was, the days are long, but the years are short. Well, whoever said that must have either been a parent or an entrepreneur, or probably both. But in that short amount of time, through effective advocacy and education, through coalescing industry stakeholders, we've helped protect and expand existing markets and create new and diverse market demand to help facilitate unprecedented and exponential growth across the North American renewable natural gas industry. Today, we have 282 operating RNG facilities, with another 180 under construction and still another 296 RNG projects that are in development. Within the next 18 months, we expect to bring online more than 750 operating RNG facilities in the United States and Canada. I recognize that may or may not sound much given your perspective, so to provide some color or context, let me take you back a few years, just to 2015, when North American RNG industry capitalized on markets we helped to facilitate and produced 13.5 billion cubic feet of RNG. In just 5 years, by 2020, we'd more than quadrupled that and produced 60 BCF of RNG. And by the end of 2025, in just 2.5 years, we expect to produce more than 230 billion cubic feet of RNG. Today, that's sufficient RNG, which can be developed from organic waste streams, sufficient to replace 13% of the total current gas demand in all of the United States. Put a different way, that's enough RNG to supply and decarbonize 45% of total industrial demand in the United States, or 75% of current residential demand, or 100% of current commercial gas demand nationwide. In Canada, that's enough RNG potential to supply and decarbonize 10% of commercial demand or 10% of residential demand. The transportation market has been most attractive, again, not coincidentally, but strategically in a direct result of compelling federal and state policy programs that incent use of RNG in vehicles, that today, nationwide, nearly 70% of all natural gas vehicles, or NGVs, are fueled by RNG. And in California, already 100% of NGVs on the roadway are fueled by renewable natural gas. To appreciate that, I think you might have to understand just how far we've come as an industry in a fairly short amount of time, just 12 years, which pointedly illustrates and contrasts the power of what's possible when we coalesce versus taking an everyone for themselves approach, especially when our purpose is as noble as ours. In North America, the very first commercial RNG facility, at as best we could track, was developed 41 years ago in 1982 at the Fresh Kills landfill on Staten Island, New York. Of course, it wasn't called RNG then. Until 2011, everything was called biogas or referred to as biomethane, and that's still the case in many countries around the world, and probably in Australia too. But we intentionally differentiate between biogas and RNG in North America for a number of reasons. One is we succeeded in passing legislation and implementing new regulation. We had to differentiate between the commodities. Biogas has a very limited application. In the United States and Canada, it can only be combusted to produce renewable electricity. It has to be upgraded to RNG, a product gas, where millions of dollars are required and expense to treat and remove other gas constituents so that the product meets pipeline quality standards or transportation fuel grade, such that it can be injected into and transported via the existing gas infrastructure or dispensed into medium and heavy duty natural gas vehicles. We strategically refer to our industry's commodity as renewable natural gas to simultaneously highlight the renewable nature of RNG and its interchangeability with conventional natural gas and our pipeline system. Increasingly, RNG is being transported via and decarbonizing our pipeline system. It's being used to replace conventional natural gas to fuel, heat, and power our vehicles, homes, and businesses. The first of its kind, the Fresh Kills landfill gas to RNG facility I mentioned, is still operating today, delivering RNG now to thousands of satisfied customers across the northeastern United States. And we're proud of that. But between its operationality in 1982 and 2011, 30 years later, only 30 additional RNG facilities were successfully developed, for a meager average of just one facility per year over 3 decades. As a result, as you can imagine, very few people knew what we were talking about when we coined the phrase renewable natural gas as part of our organization's name in 2011 and began advocating for RNG. One of the first questions we often answered when meeting with federal, state, or provincial lawmakers was, what is renewable natural gas? And how is it different from natural gas? And maybe some of you have similar questions today. And certainly over the last 12 plus years, the questions have evolved, but questions still exist. And they aren't always of an inquisitive nature. Some of them are interrogative, derogatory, accusatory, and even dismissive, but we're passionate about the work we get to do. And we invite those questions because we understand that rejection, in a worst case, is often a symptom of ignorance and a prerequisite to accept it. So we double down on our advocacy and our education efforts. We crafted a philosophy that has guided our organization since our inception. And that is, advocacy and education inform policies. Policies are what influence markets. Markets drive demand. Demand determines value. Value impacts revenue. And revenue inextricably correlates with sustainability, or the ability of stakeholders such as you and I across industry to exist and to thrive. Correlating and expanding market opportunities enabled our industry to quadruple their 3 decades long annual production average from 1 facility a year to 4, bringing 16 new RNG facilities online in our first 4 years of existence. And again, this is not to pat ourselves on the back, but rather to underscore, attribute a testament to the influence of industry stakeholders, including competitors who coalesce around a mission for the purpose of advancing the greater good. So in 2015, with 47 operating RNG facilities now, we once again challenged ourselves and our industry to do more. We said, if we do our job, advocacy and education, which is essentially storytelling to federal, state, provincial legislators, regulators, and the general public, then market opportunities will emerge and mature that allow industry to double the number of operating facilities again from 47 to 100 over the next 10 years by the year 2025. And I can recall the moment, and I'm sure members were rolling their eyes at the audacity of such a challenge. But to their credit, once again, our members responded and brought our 100th RNG facility online in July of 2019, 5.5 years ahead of schedule. To appreciate that, let me reiterate the magnitude of these milestones from a historical perspective. Again, it took industry 31 years to develop the first 30 projects between 1981 and 2011. And then industry, with the advent of the RNG Coalition and the benefit of an advocacy and education voice and a policy platform to coalesce on, industry developed 16 subsequent facilities over the next 4 years between 2011 and 2015. But industry has developed 53 new facilities over the next 4 years between 2015 and 2019. I highlight those numbers because each facility truly provides a physical metric whereby we can measure the impact that our mission and the growth of our membership and industry is having in North America. But we aren't preoccupied with numbers of facilities or production volumes just for development's sake. But as it's implied in our mission, everything we do is not just for present, but also for future generations, so that they too, like us, can enjoy access to domestic, renewable, clean fuel and energy. It's a first world privilege that we often take for granted until it's threatened. And recent world events, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine, are a reminder of just how fickle our energy economies are. We're proud of the work that our organization and industry has done and is doing, including to bring 251 new RNG facilities online in the last 12 years, more than 8 times the total production of industry compared to the prior 31 years. But if we're honest, we're only proud to the extent we're looking backwards. And as an organization and industry, our focus is firmly fixed on the future. Having eclipsed our 2025 objective in July of 2019, we began to envision a preferred future. And during our RNG conference in December of the same year, announced our Sustainable Methane Abatement and Recycling Timeline, or SMART, which you may have noted in our keynote title. SMART is an acronym for our initiative that's calling on all sectors to work together to capture and control methane from the more than 43,000 waste sites we've cataloged across North America, and we want to do that by 2050. In his article in 1981 on management's goals and objectives, G.T. Duran wrote that such goals should be specific, they should be measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. We took that to heart and have, with the help of our membership and lab enrollment, identified meaningful SMART benchmarks that include 500 operating facilities by 2025, 1,000 operating facilities by 2030, and more than 5,000 by 2040 to maintain a trajectory that assures we'll achieve our SMART by the mid-century point. But to advance our mission and achieve these SMART benchmarks, the RNG Coalition has taken a number of steps. We've partnered with the Global Methane Initiative. We've tripled the size of our organization staff, to optimize federal, state, and provincial policy advocacy, to improve public education through communications and marketing, events, data, and research. We've continued to provide stakeholders and policymakers with current, reliable data and information. We've spearheaded legislative and regulatory efforts at the state, federal, and provincial levels in support of industry and our shared mission, promoted the continuation of existing or introduction of new investment and production tax credit and grant programs like the Inflation Reduction Act. We've provided complimentary weekly educational webinars to all industry stakeholders and the general public on a range of technical policy, market, and financial topics. We continue to support our membership and industry with best-in-class annual events like our RNG Summit, which is our mid-year policy forum, our RNG Works, our technical workshop and trade expo, RNG Conference, our annual gathering of industry leadership from around the world, and Smart Cup, the golf tournament fundraiser for our SMART endowment. And we continue to support our members with regional and topic-specific RNG Connect events in major cities across the United States and Canada. We've also developed our own coalition coverage insurance program that allows us to leverage our membership's group buying power to improve access and reduce the cost of insurance for RNG Coalition members so those hard-earned dollars can be better put to work elsewhere. We established 5 leadership advisory boards I mentioned earlier. Again, leadership, education, advocacy, development, and sustainability are keys to the advancement of our mission. And each of these labs house specific committees comprised of committed members who volunteer extra time to lend and leverage their expertise in support of mission and our SMART. The labs are among our most important tools for realizing our SMART initiative, and we'll continue to leverage them to promote public policies that value methane capture and create economic incentives for RNG and methane abatement, that pursue public education initiatives to promote a greater understanding of RNG through traditional online and social media, that promote industry best practices and technical education, and support the development and adoption of greenhouse gas measurement standards that account for emissions and mitigations and expand RNG use in non-regulated voluntary markets. By definition, at least according to Stanford, SMART infers intelligence or acumen. It's an aptitude or the possession of knowledge and understanding derived through study and education. So we know there's born smarts and then there's book smarts. But it's what we do with what we know that benefits society the most. And we believe that RNG epitomizes sustainability. We are redeeming society's refuse and converting an environmental liability into an asset in the form of renewable energy. RNG is unique in that it takes a product that's negatively impacting the environment currently, waste, and creates a clean and reliable energy resource that's fully compatible with current infrastructure and appliances, serving a productive role in the clean energy transition. Society, you and I are part of it, will always produce some waste, which naturally emits surface level methane as it decomposes. We can and should capture methane from our waste streams and prevent that methane from entering the atmosphere. We've never suggested RNG is a single silver bullet. We understand it's but one essential piece of the puzzle, but it's a crucial piece and important that we maintain a diverse portfolio of solutions that work together to combat climate change. RNG is a complement to other renewable energy sources because it's storable, it's dispatchable, and can be combined with other fuel, heat, and power generation resources, providing reliable energy in a more sustainable and circular economy. RNG supply, however, will continue to follow demand. RNG Coalition remains committed to policy and market support for all end-use applications of RNG, including natural gas vehicles, electric vehicles, for sustainable aviation fuel, marine fuel, for rail, biointermediate pathways to liquid fuels, and non-fuel renewable heat delivery to customers by North America's pipelines and utility companies. You know your kids have grown up around industry terminology when they come home from school with jokes like, "Dad, if H2O is water, and CO2 is carbon, and CH4 is methane, then what is H2O for?" And all the scientists in the room are probably raising their hand or shouting answers back at me that I apologize, I can't hear. But the answer is H2O is for drinking. And dad joke, we can laugh about that, but there's truly nothing humorous about the impact we know methane and carbon are having on our environment as we speak. And knowing what the answer is, the joke is actually on all of us if we fail to respond in a timely manner. And carbon captures a lot of attention programmatically, but methane is a short-lived climate pollutant and a greenhouse gas that is 26 to 38 times more potent than carbon on a life cycle basis, meaning that methane doesn't last as long in the atmosphere, but its impact on global warming is far worse than CO2. RNG is biogas that has been conditioned to a near pure methane content such that it's interchangeable with natural gas. And whereas fossil, geologic, or conventional natural gas is derived from limited natural resources found deep beneath the Earth's surface, RNG comes from biogas that's captured wherever organic waste is aggregated. Municipal solid waste, landfills, organic materials diverted away from landfills, wastewater treatment plants, livestock, agricultural waste operations. The reality is, as long as our planet is populated with people and animals, and as long as you and I insist on feeding our families and our pets and livestock with food, there's always going to be some waste. But what we do with the waste we produce matters. In Australia, I understand you have what you call wheelie bins. Am I right? Anyone have a wheelie bin or two or three? In California, we have the rainbow. We have colors for everything. We have green waste bins, blue recycling, and black trash bins that we push out to the curb once a week, or in my case, my 12-year-old son, that's his responsibility. In New York, they pile everything in plastic trash bags and just leave it on the sidewalk. In Texas, they don't even bother with trash bags. They just throw their garbage out on the street. And in some states, they burn the trash out in fields. Every state is different. I get that. But regardless, for most of us, once we've removed the refuse from our home and it's out of sight, it's out of mind. But a life cycle is just beginning. That apple core, banana peel, orange rind, leftover goldfish. Every time we shower, we wash or flush, whether it ends up in a landfill or is diverted to a compost facility or a digester, the organic waste biodegrades naturally and emits methane. So again, I ask, what should we do with the waste that we're producing as a society? What should we do with the methane that's emitting from those waste streams? And again, more importantly, what can you and I do about it? We know what needs to be done and are already 12 years in doing something about it. We're all in on RNG and invite you to participate in the mission. In fact, we've made it one of our education goals to increase the level of public consciousness such that when people think of renewable energy in the near future, they immediately include RNG in the top 3 along with wind and solar. And as part of SMART, we've identified 43,000 sites where organic waste is aggregated across North America today, at more than 3,000 food waste and agricultural operations, more than 4,400 landfills, 17,000 wastewater treatment plants, 19,000 large farms, and more than 140 million tons of food waste per year. I want those numbers to sink in, because with all of the world-leading climate change that California and the Western Hemisphere, the United States like to take credit for, and all of our renewable energy objectives, with all of our collective efforts to reduce, reuse, and recycle, the World Bank still projects that organic waste in North America is going to increase 70%
by 2050. You too have a growing population that produces increasing amounts of organic waste, so you too bear some responsibility to address the inevitable methane emissions that will otherwise negatively impact the environment if not mitigated. According to the Queensland's government website, the majority of food waste in Australia comes from homes, with each household wasting an average of 2.5 million tons of food per year. Organic material makes up, if I'm not mistaken, about half of what Queenslanders throw away in their wheelie bin each week. The Australian economy loses $36.5 billion, billion with a B, per year due to food waste. And households account for 50% of this. You and I are complicit. Australian households spend up to $2,500 per year on food that is wasted. So consider that RNG also has the potential to reduce food waste and reduce food costs. RNG and byproducts like fertilizer and soil amendments create new revenue streams for farmers, helping them to keep food prices lower. By powering farms and fueling the vehicles that deliver our food, RNG provides savings throughout the food production and delivery system. I hope that each of you will begin asking yourself the question we started our RNG careers with 13 years ago, and this talk about 20 minutes ago, with the question, what should we do with the waste we're producing as a society? And I understand that by the end of the decade, Australia has a national target to have food waste, but that's only food waste, not including organics from other waste streams. We must reduce, reuse, and recycle, yes. However, we also need solutions for the inevitable food waste, for manure, for municipal solid waste, and for wastewater. Because RNG facilities capture emissions from society's waste streams and redeems its energy value, it has the lowest life cycle carbon intensity of any clean energy source available today. RNG truly helps decarbonize energy and combats climate change simultaneously. In North America, we used to export our waste to other countries until finally they said enough is enough. And it's forcing us to reconcile, what are we doing with the waste we're responsible for producing? The time is ripe to lobby government officials and business leaders with the question, what are we doing with the methane that's emitting from our waste streams? And to ask ourselves, what can I do about it? Coalitions exist, platforms are in place. 12 years later, we're here to tell you about some of it. Information is in abundance. You can make a difference by advocating for and promoting public policies that support RNG technologies and development of RNG facilities, because RNG is an immediately available and no-regret solution to help improve society's response to waste and the emissions created from it. RNG has been a clean source of energy for decades, but it's growing in importance and popularity today because the urgent need to combat climate change and deal with the emissions of society's growing waste streams is upon us. RNG is not a marketing pitch. It's a tangible and immediately available solution predicated on improving waste management and reducing emissions. It's regulated and promoted as clean, green energy by the US Environmental Protection Agency and similarly situated state entities, as well as throughout Canada, Europe, and the rest of the world. Governments and companies are coming around and are embracing RNG because it provides a real, sustainable path to decarbonization. Because the emissions from waste are not optional. Rather, they're a naturally occurring source of greenhouse gas that we must address. And RNG is an essential part of that energy future. We believe the circular economy is essential and that we need everyone working toward meaningful solutions, including companies whose core businesses have historically focused on traditional energy sources. RNG has multiple benefits. It sustainably mitigates methane emissions, it provides a direct substitute for geologic natural gas, helps decarbonize transportation, stationary applications, and the electric and gas grids too. RNG is also a key feedstock for production of crucial future energy resources like renewable hydrogen and sustainable aviation fuel. Other key technologies convert raw biogas into electricity, or convert biogas to combined heat and power, or incorporate strategic biogas flaring. Each technology and end-use application of biogas will be necessary to achieve our SMART initiative. My understanding per Bioenergy Australia's recent opportunity assessment report is that biogas and RNG, or biomethane, can contribute to more than half of all gaseous consumption in Australia by 2050. As in the US and the EU, a policy framework is needed to provide the investment certainty that industry needs to build out in Australia. So a few policies as we near a close you might consider advocating for could include a renewable gas target that highlights RNG, an extension of the guarantee of origin scheme currently in development for hydrogen to other renewable gases, including RNG, a national harmonized approach to project regulation for funding and approvals, and appropriately targeted funding support. You can make a difference. You are making a difference. And we invite you to participate in a number of ways, including engaging with international RNG or biomethane stakeholders, including through the Clean Energy Ministerial and our RNG Coalition's Global Committee and our future Global Smart Forum. Identify, sponsor, or consider commissioning research that fills information gaps and helps stakeholders to overcome technical, market, or policy impediments. Help us work to reduce the cost of RNG facility development, including through promotion of technical innovation. Identify project candidate sites by class and promote adoption of RNG and other appropriate methane and carbon capture and utilization facilities. Inevitably, legislative and regulatory landscapes shift politically and over time. But whatever the case, we must be vigilant and never stop asking, what should we do with the waste we're producing as a society? What should we do with the methane that's emitting from those waste streams? And what can we do about it? On behalf of the RNG Coalition and those who aspire for cleaner air and energy independence everywhere, thank you for your time and attention today. And may God bless all of your efforts and support for our mission in Australia and around the world.
Okay, I'll try not to tell as bad a joke as Johannes just did, but we'll see how we go. Why are we talking so much about the US? Well, you can see from Johannes' talk, it's a massive industry in the US. There was a conference in Chicago last week that set a new record for a biogas conference in the US. 1,500 people attended. So there's something to aspire to for Bioenergy Australia. We'll get there over time, but it's, I think, a key takeaway for me and something that we all should be aware of, it's not rocket science. It's not new technology. It's all proven. As Dr. Houston said earlier, it's established technology that's being used extensively across Europe, across North America, and we just need a will and particularly some policy appetite in Australia to help develop the industry here. As I mentioned earlier, I've recently returned from visiting our US operations, including 2 sites that we're commissioning right now. And I'm going to be talking today about a bit more, in perhaps a bit more hands-on way and practical way than Johannes was, about what we can learn from the US biomethane industry, or as I said before, RNG. And it's particularly timely that I can talk to you about it today. Before I get to that, I just want to give you a little bit of background about how this all happened for EDL. We've been in the US since 1997, so over 25 years of experience, and we entered Canada in 2017. And I can tell you from my recent visit, we've got an incredibly energetic, experienced and eager team of around 170 people supporting our operations in the US and Canada. We've been taking waste gases and turning them into power or transport fuel for decades, and historically our landfill gas facilities in North America have been used to produce electricity. But in 2020, our US operations leveraged our landfill gas to electricity business to expand into renewable natural gas, or as we call it here, biomethane. So what are the pathways for biomethane and uses? And this is very basic stuff, but hopefully it helps a little bit. Traditionally, we've been taking waste biogas from landfills across the globe and generating renewable power. That's the bottom right pathway. That's helping decarbonise the energy sector. In the last few years, we've made major investments in the US producing renewable natural gas, and that gas is derived from organic waste, as we've been saying, and then processed to pipeline quality standards. A much more expensive way of dealing with the gas than making power out of it, because the processing is more complex, but again, it's not rocket science, it's proven technology. The benefit of capturing the methane is twofold. First, methane that escapes into the atmosphere has a higher global warming potential than CO2, up to 28 times more. So capturing it and using it for combustion has a large environmental benefit. And RNG that's used instead of fossil fuel means that amount of fossil fuel stays in the ground. The carbon in RNG was already in the ecosystem, so it's not adding new carbon. RNG is compatible with existing pipelines and natural gas appliances, avoiding expensive upgrades for households or businesses, and there's no need to change any equipment to use it, and gas networks don't need to upgrade their pipelines to deliver it. It can be also used as a natural gas substitute for hard-to-electrify industries. It can be liquefied to LNG or compressed to CNG and is used extensively in transport across North America and Europe, helping to decarbonise transport. But most importantly, it can be produced at scale today, using existing technologies. It's currently much cheaper than developing options such as hydrogen, because unlike hydrogen, it's a straightforward, fungible replacement for fossil fuel gas. Renewable natural gas can also be converted to low-carbon biofuels, which can help decarbonise hard-to-abate heavy transport, trucks, shipping, aviation, and this, of course, would improve domestic fuel security in Australia. And there's obviously a lot of talk at the moment about SAF, which we're a firm believer in and think there's a great future for SAF in Australia. It has significant advantages over other renewable opportunities such as solar and wind, which require major infrastructure changes and potentially clearing vast areas. So not only is RNG realistic, but it's a sustainable approach to help Australia on its journey to net zero. So pioneering into uncharted territory isn't new for EDL, nor does it deter our mission to deliver beyond our customers' expectations. Since the 1990s, we've been taking methane from waste gases generated by landfills and using this waste gas to generate electricity, which is sold into the NEM. We've been trucking LNG up and down the West Australian coast to keep the lights on for West Kimberley communities since 2008, something we continued to do earlier this year despite the floods, the January 2023 floods in the Kimberley, which cut roads and bridges. Bridges were literally washed away, and thanks to the dedication of our frontline workers, we kept the lights on in the Kimberley. We're now growing this clean energy business, investing more in biomethane, renewable natural gas facilities to provide a clean alternative to fossil fuel-derived natural gas. So while it's relatively new for Australia, as I said before, many countries across the globe have incredibly advanced industries. And just speaking of Johannes for a minute, in December, I joined one of the conferences. I was on an RNG panel discussion in California, which coincidentally, that conference, and it's maybe something we should think about for Bioenergy Australia, we had a golf tournament on the first day, which certainly was an appealing aspect of it and encouraged a lot of people to attend, and a lot of fun to start it off that way. But the panel discussion involved RNG business leaders from the US, Netherlands, France, Italy, Denmark, and me from Australia. So they were all talking about their fantastic, mature RNG industries, what they're doing to move the needle when they'd already done so much. And what do you think I had to say? Pretty much sorry, and thank you for helping us to understand what's possible. It was a real eye-opener for me, and you hear Johannes' passion there around the development of the industry in the US, but we are just so far behind North America and Europe, but it's not too late. It's no coincidence that where there are successful RNG industries, there are supportive policy mechanisms, either currently in place or being developed. For example, the UK has the Renewable Transport Fuels and Green Gas Support Schemes, and the EU is developing a package of policies designed to increase its renewable gas supply more than tenfold to around 1,300 petajoules a year by 2030 as part of its Repower the EU plan. So what's required to make investment a success? And I'll come back to this in a minute, but this is what we had in the US. We had feedstock availability, we had supportive regulatory framework, and we had a market demand. And on the back of that, we've invested $350 million in developing biomethane plants in the US in the last 4 or 5 years. Johannes talked a little bit about this. This sort of sets it out in a graphical way. How has the RNG industry grown in the US? And it's been growing at a rapid rate with 281 operating assets. I think he said 282. It must be a new one that's been commissioned recently. And many hundred more in construction or under development. And the strong growth in the US has been driven by a combination of policies, and this is absolutely key. The Federal Renewable Fuel Scheme, the California Low Carbon Fuel Scheme, and state green gas mandates, and more recently the Inflation Reduction Act, which I'll come back to in a minute. But these are the policies that have really driven the increase in supply and demand in the US. There are two main sources of demand in RNG in the US. First, federal and state renewable and low carbon fuel schemes, which help decarbonise transport. And since 2007, federal law in the US has mandated specific volumes of renewable fuels to be sold in the US each year. From 2013, this included a more significant portion of what's known as cellulosic biofuels, which includes biofuels produced from sources such as landfill gas. Each year, the US EPA converts those volumes to a percentage of renewable fuels that conventional fuel suppliers must either produce themselves or purchase from people like us. Producers like EDL earn D3 RINs, a renewable identification number, for biomethane that makes its way into the transport sector. The other source of demand, and this is something that's really accelerating, it's a voluntary aspect of the market, direct use. Industrial customers, and they're doing it in Australia, they just have less options for reducing carbon and reducing emissions in Australia. But industrial customers in the US and Europe are setting emission reduction goals, and they're buying RNG to meet those voluntary reduction goals. Several utilities also have consumer programs offering RNG content in exchange for a monthly fee. Oregon's just one state that's introduced a voluntary RNG procurement scheme. That scheme began in 2020 and allows gas utilities to recover the additional cost involved in procuring and selling a certain amount of biomethane. And one of our major customers in the US is Northwest Natural, based in Oregon, and we've signed up a 20-year deal with Northwest Natural to supply RNG. They put it into their pipeline network and dilute the fossil fuels that's otherwise in their pipeline network and supply renewable gas to mums and dads across Oregon. Two final things to mention on this slide. The Inflation Reduction Act, and there's been a lot of talk about that, and particularly recently there's been talk that Australian battery mineral producers might be able to take advantage of the US Inflation Reduction Act in developing assets in Australia, and I haven't really got my head around how that's going to work, because the way the Inflation Reduction Act works is it allows developers investment tax credits on the capital cost of renewable facilities such as RNG facilities. And that's potentially worth in the region of 30% of the capex that we spend on these RNG projects. There's lots of conditions around it. You have to start construction by the end of next year. So as you can imagine, there's a bit of a gold rush on in the US, and it's very hard to get supply. Supply chain challenges are real, constructor challenges are real, EPC contractor challenges are real, because there's such a drive on to take advantage of these tax incentives that have been passed by the Biden government. The other thing I'd like to mention is not on this slide because it's so new, but there's a potential for something called an E-RIN. The RINs I talked about before were for molecules. The E-RINs are for electrons. And there's a new principle being debated and potentially rolled out as early as 1 January next year, where producers of renewable electricity from biogas could potentially earn a RIN, a renewable identification number, where it can show the electricity is used in an electric vehicle. There's more to come on this, but if you can trace a pathway from producing an electron from biogas, ends up in an electric vehicle, and that demand's growing obviously across the US and across the world, you can earn an E-RIN, which I'm not going to go through the complex maths involved, but it's an added benefit. You sell the power, you get the black price for the power, you already get a green credit for the power, and this is an additional incentive to produce more electricity from biogas and use that in electric vehicles. I'm just going to show you a quick video that highlights the first 3 RNG plants that EDL has developed in the US. Get this to work. So that was our first 3 plants, and we've got 2 more in commissioning in Ohio right now. We've invested more than $350 million US, and we'll spend another $56 million a year over the 20-year plus life of the projects. We're ramping up to 7 petajoules of RNG in the pipeline network in Australia, in the US, I wish in Australia, by mid this year. We've invested in the US because policies are favourable. As global policies drive towards net zero, we're in an advantaged position to contribute to emissions reduction. And the IEA, again, just looking at the scale of the challenge and the scale of the opportunity, has calculated that achieving global net zero emissions by 2050 would require a 7-fold increase in low emission gas production by 2030 and a 27-fold increase by 2050. This, of course, includes renewable gas as well as synthetic methane and hydrogen. So Australia simply can't afford to wait. It won't be easy. Governments face several challenges in continuing to deliver on their increasing decarbonisation and ambitious energy reforms, including global demand shocks, wars, rising energy prices, recovery from COVID, and increasing overseas competition, particularly from places like the US, where people like us are taking advantage of policies such as the Inflation Reduction Act. But what do we need? What do we need to unlock the biomethane industry in Australia? We have the feedstock. We've got wastewater, municipal waste, agricultural waste, and we have the demand. We're missing the supportive regulatory framework. There are a number of aspects to this, and this has been covered already, and I'm sure there'll be more talk on this in the conference, so I won't take up too much time on it, but we need green gas certification. We need a renewable gas target. We need market access. We need early asset financing with support from entities like ARENA and the CEFC. And we need market incentives, putting in place financial incentives enabling customers to purchase renewable gas. The federal, state and territory governments recognise the potential of biomethane. It's very encouraging to see progress being made in several areas, including around green gas targets. So watch this space. At EDL, we've been innovating for more than 30 years, and we've got an unparalleled portfolio and very diverse portfolio across renewable natural gas, renewables and hybrids, remote energy, landfill gas, LNG and waste coal mine gas. So we already play an active role in decarbonising the planet through our clean energy and remote energy businesses, but more and more we're seeing an overlap between those businesses because we're the market leader in microgrids, remote microgrids, and we can currently deliver energy to mines and communities that are a long way from grids at a renewable fraction of about 90%. And the final 10% is made up of diesel or gas. And we see potential to increase that fraction towards 100% by using renewable gas and renewable fuels as the thermal component of microgrids. And if we can do that on a microgrid scale, say up to 100 megawatts, then we can certainly take those learnings and apply them to the national grid as well. So I'm being wrapped up here, but just one final thing to say. It's been a real pleasure to be part of the Renewable Fuels Week. I wish you all well with the conference today, and it's great to see the work being done and the amount of enthusiasm around the country to help us reach net zero together. And on that note, there are a few members of the Brisbane team here today. As you can see the photos on the slide. I encourage you to stop, say hello, introduce yourself, have a chat, or myself as well, and let's get to know each other and let's support each other in this journey we're on to help biomethane be a very real industry in Australia and soon. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kunal, Chief Growth Officer for Anaergia. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to the elderly past and present. I have presented here before last year talking a bit about our work in US and Europe. Thanks Shahana and Bioenergy Australia for having us here again to talk about today Italy. A disclaimer that we are at Anaergia interested and committed to invest, develop, co-develop, partner, and build biomethane plants in Australia one day. I get a lot of questions yesterday because we're doing a lot of work in the US and Europe. What are we doing in Australia? How things are going for us? And I have an answer that work is still in progress here. We have 24 hours in a day and a balance sheet to achieve quarterly numbers. So we are focusing on where there are incentives and market play. So we will come here one day. But here today to share some of the work we are doing, especially in Italy. And it's not more about us, but about how we have done what we have done. Just a background is that Anaergia is a listed Canadian company. We took a tech company from $0 million to $180 million revenue just in the business of biogas and biomethane, present in about 4 continents across the world. So US, Europe, but also very much in Africa and Asia Pacific. So that's the idea. Now, yesterday we saw a lot of our friends from the SAF world, hydrogen world, large numbers, large projects. I would also say a lot of promises, all good, and we need all of those as well in this play. But I think some of them, if you are here from yesterday, and there is a lot of synergy which can be achieved between the both sector, because biogas is a common play. Now, buongiorno, as they say in Italian. I am going to present today about the market conditions that enabled us to build a very large biomethane platform. And I would like to underline all this is done in 3 years in the COVID-19 peak period. So we've invested 240 million euros just in the last 2 years to build 6 biomethane facilities in Italy. Now, Italians have given us a lot, the world, a lot of interesting things, pastas, pizzas, and more. But I think in the world of biogas and biomethane as well, they have done something very amazing. And hopefully I'll be able to tell you a little bit about that. So key success factors doesn't change across the world, US, Europe, or Australia. There is a matrix that you need feedstock, you need definitely government policy and support, and then obviously also offtake. But I've also highlighted in red color something which is in our control as developers or builders of this facility, our capability, our persistence, and our confidence of identifying how we stitch all this together. Now, behind every successful biogas project, there is a story. And the story in Italy is something which I will explain to you in a consecutive slides. So feedstock is very important, the type, the availability, and the price. Biogas plants which are paying for feedstock, which happens in many places in Europe for straw and stuff, they are viable because there is a very good feed-in tariff for the gas. There are certain feedstock which you receive money or gate fees to process, like food waste or municipal solid waste, as they say. Offtake is also very interesting. It's not just a single word. Price matters, of course, but also the tenure of the offtake matters. Is it 1 year? Is it 5 years? Is it fixed? Is it merchant? Is it voluntary? The off-taker party matters. So when we see the word Qantas in a SAF project, the bankers are all, wow. No matter the project gets built up in 2030, but there is Qantas as an off-taker. It creates an atmosphere that there is some viable party which is off-taking. In the case of Italy, it's the government of Italy, the state of Italy, which buys all the gas for 10 years with a CIC credit. And the big box on the top is government regulations and policies. I'll talk about that in a minute. Look at the diagram. This is from the EBA, European Biogas Association, which talks about a 10-fold pathway to developing biogas and biomethane in any country. It starts with a national vision. I hope there could be some here, as you have for hydrogen, there is a national vision here, but a national vision for biogas, and Italy expressed its national vision for biomethane as part of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. There was an analysis done by various departments in Italy on the feedstock availability. There was a report done on what the consumers and what the demand for this could be in the transportation sector, in the industries, and in residential sectors. Obviously, I will not go through detail on this part, but there is an eventual or a flow where Italian government went, or for that matter, every European government has gone through this 1 to 10 steps of identifying how a biomethane policy and regulation will drive. Number 6 and 7 was incentives. So Italian government came out with what we call the CIC incentives, but not just incentive, but with a target that X amount of biomethane should be injected or blended in the natural gas pipeline. So there is an incentive, but there is also a number that the country has to achieve in order to reach its decarbonization goals. There's one more thing is about stakeholder engagement. So Italian government and the local biogas association there went through a lot of public policy setting. The city of Milan went on an awareness campaign on source segregation of food waste. And last but not the least is, the European Commission then enabled the disposal of digestate back on the farmland and a whole series of awareness around it. Now, some market data. Quickly, we all know that Germany was kind of the founder and a leader in biogas world, but it's so surprising to see that Italy has 1,800 biogas plants operating as we speak. Sorry for the terawatt-hour numbers. I know this gigajoules and petajoules here, but please bear with me. Now, there was only, all these plants were electricity, so biogas and biogas to electricity. There was only one biomethane plant running in 2018, only one. And fast forward, end of 2021, we had 27. And Italy is interesting because it has 700,000 vehicles running on CNG and LNG, fossil CNG and LNG, of course. And there's a massive infrastructure of CNG filling stations. European Commission gave Italy, and all this I will, just bear with me, there's another slide on what happened and how it went through. Italy was given 4.5 billion euros by the European Union to fund this platform again, versus the 2 billion Aussie dollar here. In terms of biomethane plants, Italy has now home to 27 biomethane plants. There is an incentive which was further extended. And the government said, not just earlier the incentive was focusing on agriculture waste, and now it's a lot of focus on organic fraction of municipal solid waste, a lot of feedstock which comes with tipping fees. I have been asked by the lady here to ramp up, but look at this slide. The first incentive in Italy came in the year 2008 and 2012. Surprisingly, the farmers were behind this incentive, the farmers of the country. There was a lobby which said that we would like to use agriculture products, not just the waste, but agriculture produce, to convert that into renewable energy. It was a very, very high incentive. Nobody wanted to grow tomatoes and capsicums, and they all wanted to grow food for energy. Obviously, it had a non-sustainable way. The subsidy was canceled in 2012. The new subsidy came in 2018, and this was driven by the transportation sector, as I just mentioned. But who pays the bill? The polluters pay the bill. So the Italian government asked the large national oil companies, who are polluters, to pay for this incentives called the CIC incentive. And that's how the credit came. But in 2022, our friends from the oil and gas industry, of course, who have spent a lot of money on these gas intensive, went to the European Union and said that we can't bear it all on our shoulders. Fortunately, COVID-19 hit. And in 2022, the European Union gave a resilience package, which fortunately was very good for the biomethane sector, because that resilience package gave billions of euros to Italy to fund the next phase of the credits. I will just go to the CIC credit. I'm happy to discuss in detail that how this credit works, what is the number fixed by the Italian government, and all that is also available on Google. But for friends here who understand this price of biomethane, look at this chart here. For every MMBTU of biomethane generated in Italy, this is the whole incentive, we get almost about 50 Aussie dollars a gigajoule. That's the incentive, and that's a no-brainer, that's why we are able to build so many facilities and why investors like it. So it's a natural gas price. On top of that, an incentive, the CIC credit. If you're converting that into CNG for transportation, there is an additional addition of 2 euros an MMBTU. And if you make LNG, there is another additional 2 euros of MMBTU. The new incentive is up to 40% of CapEx contribution plus a tariff. So all in all, it ranges between 40 to 50 Aussie dollars a gigajoule is the price we get for biomethane in Italy. And well, I didn't get a chance, but These are the 6 lovely plants. Welcome anybody to come and visit. Some are near beautiful city of Rome, some are near Milan. All the 6 are on food waste generated by cities. So we get a tipping fee to process this, ranges between 80 euros to 120 euros a ton. So that's a revenue we get. And then we convert all this into renewable natural gas, which is injected into the grid. Available for questions later, but some of these facilities and pictures. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name's Callum. I'm Business Development Manager for Evonik here in Australia. So today I'm going to talk about the biogas and biomethane market in Europe. So unfortunately, the previous presenters didn't give any spoiler warnings, but Europe is very big with biogas, as you'll hear with my presentation. So in terms of comparisons, Europe is about double what China's doing and about 3 to 4 times what the US has with biogas and biomethane. So before I begin, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. So a little bit about Evonik. So Evonik's a German specialty chemicals company located throughout the world. The applications that we have go from automotive to animal nutrition. But what's really driving us is the innovative renewable gas economy, sustainable gas economy. So from our roller cell products, which is a foam that can be used in wind turbines, through to the membranes that can be used in AM electrolyzers, to the materials for polymers for distribution pipeworks, all the way up to our separation membranes, which I'll talk to a little bit on the next slide. So this is our main product that we have for biogas, which is a separation membrane that can be used to improve the quality of the gas. So you can separate the biogas, the carbon dioxide and the CO2, carbon dioxide and the methane to get a very pure stream of biomethane and a pure stream of carbon dioxide. Okay, notes aren't working. So with the European biogas market, Europe's largest biogas and biomethane producer globally. In terms of the production that they produce, in petajoules, that's 133.2 petajoules of biomethane in 2021, and over 572. We're seeing a plateau with the biogas production over the last few years, and that's due to some regulation changes. But we are seeing a big growth in biomethane, and that's consistently growing year upon year. One thing I don't talk about too much in this presentation, but that is important, is that the value that we get from biogenic CO2 and digestate, it adds to the economies of the plants and can really help improve the scale of production and growth in the industry. With the forecasts, the plan for biomethane is trending to grow. The most recent forecasts are at the top there, with over 6,000 petajoules per year. And that's really going to be driven by a few policies that have come into place. So one that was mentioned yesterday was the Refuel or Repower EU, and that sets a negative 55% net emissions for greenhouse gases, and then 35 billion metres cubed of biomethane, which is 10 times what they're currently producing. So within the last 20 to 30 years of biogas and biomethane production needs to be multiplied by 10 in the next 7 to reach that target. So it's a big job, but as you'll see in the next coming slides, there's projects on the go, and that industry is growing quite significantly in Europe. So some of the laws and regulations that have really helped push this industry to grow. Each one builds upon the other, and you see that they line up with a lot of the major climate change policies that you see throughout the world, so Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement. So two big ones, the Renewable Energy Directive in 2009, with the 20% renewables for each member state by 2020. And each member state gets to decide how they put those policies in place to reach that target. So we get a good comparison between country to country and can see what works, what doesn't work so well. And then the 28 sequel, the Renewable Energy Directive 2, which is a 32% renewable energy sources by 2030 and 14% transport energy. Transport's quite big for biogas, biomethane use in Europe, and it has helped significantly grow the sector. And then the most recent one, as mentioned earlier, the Repower EU plan. So over 268 billion euros of investment, and it's driven really by Ukraine-Russia war to diversify their energy supplies so that they're not relied on external sources for their energy. So just to take a little bit of a closer look, France first up. You see a fairly significant growth with biogas, but biomethane's accelerated significantly just in the last couple of years. The number of plants is growing. I think there's about 112 installed in the last year, and over another 91 petajoules in production or under development by 2025. So earlier, 2015, France initiated laws for the French Act on Energy Transition, and that stipulated a 10% biomethane in the grid by 2030. They also had fixed feed-in tariffs and long subsidy years. So 15 years subsidies for their injection into the grid. And so that has provided the security for investors that they know that they're going to be able to get and return for their investment. With Germany, Germany's the largest country for biogas production and biomethane. In terms of number of plants, France has just overtaken them with a number of biomethane plants. And what's really sort of holding back Germany at the moment is more of the regulation side of things. It's more difficult to build and approve a biomethane plant versus in France, where it's quite quick and easy, and there's a lot more smaller ones in France, whereas Germany has much larger plants of 1,000 metres cubed per hour capacity. Driven by the need for energy security and electrification. So a lot of the gas that's produced in Germany is going into electrification, some is into transport, but that's what's really driven the policies. With Denmark, Denmark's the third largest producer of biomethane in Europe, behind Germany and the UK. And they've had a really strong focus, especially in the most recent years, to make their gas grid fully renewable. So their target is to be 100% of their domestic gas grid to be running off biomethane by 2030. At the moment, it's at 25%, so a quarter of their gas is coming from biomethane. They have green certificate trading schemes for biomethane that's injected, and then that can be traded with the fossil fuel companies. Also, again, long-term subsidy agreements, so 20 years, and we see that trend within other countries, the 15 to 20 years or 10 to 20 years, really helps drive that investment. So just to almost finish up, the policies that were driving growth around Europe, the top line has some policies that aren't working very well, and you don't see as good as significant biomethane or biogas industry, whereas the bottom row you see much better biomethane uptake and biogas production development. So with the top line, some common themes. When the regulatory framework is more directed towards electricity production, you'll see the biogas producers just combust the gas instead of converting to biomethane. When the laws change, you'll see the change in the uptake grow for biomethane quite quickly soon after that. When the regulations change for biogas production, you tend to see a bit of a plateau in terms of the number of biogas plants being built and the increase in production. So needing to keep the regulations in place for long term and to really provide support for the industry is necessary to see that growth continue year on year. So with some of the stronger governments that are doing quite well with biomethane and biogas, Sweden and Netherlands. So Sweden's doing more production of biomethane than they are of their biogas. Transport sector, again, is another common use, and so that is help driving that industry. With compressed natural gas fueling stations that use biomethane throughout the country. Green certificates is another common theme that you'll see among many countries, which helps provide that growth. Italy, as mentioned just before, I won't talk too much about that, but transportation use is a big driver there. And then they've had their recent 2018 law, which was changed to increase the amount of biomethane production. And it's, as was mentioned in the previous presentation, it's gone from 1 plant up into over 8 or 9 in the last year. And then with the UK, gas grid feed and tariffs for the biogas and biomethane. When there's a feed-in tariff for biomethane, you see the production grow quite significantly. So I think I'm pretty good with time. This is good. So just a bit of a summary. One of the most important things is the regulatory framework and the policies, and that's been driven in with the last few presentations over today and yesterday. Government support and long-term commitment. When investors know that there's going to be subsidies or the regulations are going to be in place for a significant amount of time, the investors know that they can get a return on their money for their projects. And then the industry commitment as well. So we've got a room full of people here that are all committed and interested in biomethane and biogas. And so that's something that's here in Australia. What we really need next is to get that policy steps in place so that we can grow the industry here. Thank you.